I'm Chief Superintendent Sam Miller, come from a couple of Yorkshire forces and seconded at the moment across onto the NPCC task force. Now, if my Deputy Chief Constable has stood here, this is the point at which you say, so I'm going to be here today, and that is to say that we're in a really unique position in our task force. There's only been one other task force that the NPCC has brought together, and that was Optala. And for most of the British police officers sat in this auditorium, you'll know that that was the task force that was brought together to address COVID. So we're 17 individuals, 17 collection of police officers and police staff, come together in October to create a surge of activity. And that's 17 full-time committed individuals with a dedicated full-time Deputy Chief Constable. So the investment that the National Police Chiefs Council has put around this is really significant, and we have a window of opportunity. So again, thank you for giving us the 30 minutes that we've got this morning just to talk you through what's going on. But first of all, I'm just going to turn to my right. I brought with me two of my lovely colleagues, as I won't go anywhere without them, and of course actually they've been pivotal to a lot of the work, and they'll be taking part in the presentation. So Katie, if I introduce you first.
Hi, good morning everybody. Thank you for having us. My name's Katie Harris, and my role on the task force is to lead for performance. My day job is actually very different. I work in the South East. I'm the head of intelligence for the South East Regional Organised Crime Unit.
Yes, good morning everybody. My name's Lynn Knox. I'm a superintendent in South Yorkshire. As you can probably tell from the accent, I've spent 27 years policing in Northern Ireland. I've just joined the local task force, and I'm the engagement lead.
So what we're going to do today is take you through a little bit of the journey that the task force and the work that we've been on over the last 9 months. We particularly wanted to come here because we want to talk to you about probably one of the biggest challenges we've got, and there's going to be no surprises, it's data. And it's the visibility of women and girls in our data. And as Katie will probably say as we go through the presentation, data isn't the issue, it's the systems and the processes that we collectively have in policing in order to be able to see that data and see the people and the victims that sit behind that data. So I'm going to try not use the word data too much, but it is the biggest ask. But we've also come with an ask for the academics, because there's a lot of research required, and we'll go through that when we talk about the next steps. You'll notice, though, that the title of the presentation, unashamedly, is We Can't See Her and We Can't Hear Her. Because over the last 9 months, as we've been trying to get the narrative and the voice of what it feels like to be a victim and somebody receiving the criminal justice process, it is very hard. And that's really the task that we've got in hand, which is how do we take policing and how do we move forward? We're going to give you a very, very simple scenario, but it's just going to give us an opportunity to demonstrate the tasks and the challenges that are in front of us. Okay, so just a little bit of setting the context. So in 2021, there were 3 really significant documents that were published. This one is a really critical one of those 3 because it's the Home Office. So this one is a really significant one because this sets out the statistics. It does make grim reading, and actually it's the first government document that I've seen in many years that uses words like epidemic and a crisis. And so when our Deputy Chief Constable was put in place in October, there was a critical incident named against violence against women and girls, and it was based on this documentation. Some key lines out of it then. So 1.6 million victims, as individual women, victims of domestic abuse. 2 out of 3 young girls in particular in this country say that they've experienced harassment or sexual assault within the 12 months that they were asked. That's 2/3. And then the final shocking one, of course, is, do you know where the focus here is? This is young girls' experience, harassment, stalking, domestic abuse, sexual assault. So there is no wonder that when we've got something of the scale of this in the country, that we're calling it a critical incident and we're dealing with it on an epidemic scale. The other documents that I want to refer to is, so that was the stats, and the Home Office were very clear about what does this mean for policing. But the other two documents that were really critical was HMIC. So they, on the back of a Home Secretary request, produced two reports, one in June and then a subsequent one in September. Again, we'll put links in the presentation to it. But what those two documents did is a fantastic summary, really, of everything that really has been produced from violence against women and girls. And it gave policing the nudge, to look in particular focused areas. I think what we could all see is that even with a task force and with some dedicated resource, such as police officers and police staff, and a chief officer brought in, and a National Police Chiefs Council working to that agenda, you still couldn't take everything on. So what the Home Office and the HMIC documents gave us is 5 very clear recommendations. It said to us, you have to build, you have to rebuild, but we said actually we have to build trust and confidence back in women and girls, that when they come to policing, that they are serviced. Okay, it was an enormous ask, and there are many, many recommendations behind it for many agencies. The second one was, put the focus on perpetrators. And we want to see the relentless pursuit of perpetrators. Again, for anybody in policing, that's a really significant ask, because what does that look like? How do you do it? What do perpetrator programs look like? And again, anybody sat on the MST program will know the evidence base that, to a large extent, is not there for us. And then the third one, of course, is about safer spaces, because most of the harm happening to these young girls is in a space somewhere. And it's not largely private. It's largely online. It's largely in schools. It's in those areas where our young girls frequent. So it is a massive challenge. But you can have all the government documents in the world to tell you what's going on, what the policing challenges are. The bit that really took the wind out of policing was this. Okay, I'll never call the police if I need help. So these are the headline news. And this is just the start of 2021. And of course, not brought up there through just respect of the case. On top of that, of course, was the death and the murder of Sarah Everard at the hands of a serving police officer at the time. So the challenge to policing was, we have a real requirement from the Home Office, we have an inspection regime that wants to see change, and the actual faith and the trust of the public is being absolutely taken out on various headline news. So 2021 was a really tough ask in policing, and that's where we came in. So what was the response? Okay, so Maggie Blythe, Deputy Chief Constable, brought together a task force in October last year, and what it ended up with is a plan of action, and this is the NPCC VORG delivery framework. In it, there are 3 big pillars, and the 3 big pillars absolutely drawn out of the HMIC recommendations. So what are we going to do to build trust and confidence? What do we need forces to do? What are we going to do around perpetrator programs and the pursuit of perpetrators in the safer spaces? So that delivery framework was launched and went out to forces in December 21. As I say, based on 3 pillars, and what you saw was a surge of activity across forces. The requirement was for every force to have their own VORG plan, and absolutely every force has stepped up to that call. So we received all those forces plans in by the end of March 2022, and in it, of course, there is a real narrative of activity. But the big question is, of course, is anything we are doing working? And if it is, how do we know? And where's the evidence base? You know, and that is a big ask. But how fantastic, 43 forces, some fantastic plans, and some plans that probably not quite as strong. So the picture, when we looked at the 43 plans, and that was very much Katie's job, and we'll come to Katie now, is it was an inconsistent and there needs to be learning. But there's a real opportunity across those 43 plans to do that learning. The next bit, of course, was we know that our data wasn't telling us what we needed to see. And so the challenge for Katie as a performance manager was, Katie, you need to build a performance framework that's going to give us insight. We need to understand what's happening in forces. We need to understand what's working. We need to be able to track the activity, and we need consistency of delivery in policing. And at the top of all of this, of course, we need to deliver against the recommendations to build that trust and confidence. The next bit, of course, which we've just delivered was end of June, was HMIC really on the back of our feet saying, by June, we want to know how it's going. Okay, so we've just produced this. Again, it will go public at some point in August, just timing around publication. And in it, of course, it demonstrates progress, and that's fantastic. It demonstrates a whole range of activities across a wide variety of NPCC portfolios to really address violence against women and girls. And it's got some next steps in, and this starts to now build what is the ask of academics and people sat in policing in the UK at the moment. So we need to survey victims. You know, we need to understand what it feels like. We need to understand the journey, especially, and both the HMIC and the Home Office point us to, we have got to listen to black and minoritised women and girls, and they're not heard. We need to roll out pilot studies where there's an evidence base, and currently being rolled out in 14 of our forces is Opsateria, okay, which is an investigation, qualitative piece of research about how do we improve the satisfaction of victims of rape and sexual assaults. We've got to be able to give toolkits to forces about perpetrator programmes, but based on what evidence, and where's that collated, and how do we accredit that, and how is it just good enough? What is the ask and the delivery against that? And then as we move into year 3, what's the ask of partners? So what are we going to do in schools? What does police officer in schools look like? What does upstanders of male role models look like in schools for the education of our young boys? So there's a really big ask as we go into year 3. So we do need an evidence base, we need research, and we need that expertise coming in. And then finally, by March next year, we will need to present a strategic threat and risk assessment against violence against women and girls. And that's because for the first time ever, we've managed to get violence against women and girls into the strategic policing requirement. Now, the reason that's a big deal for most of us is that means there's no option. It cannot go to the bottom of the priority list. It has to be delivered against. And there is that mandatory reporting going back. So achieving VORG at that really top level of scrutiny is hopefully going to bring the progress. But Katie, we want to illustrate what this means. So we've set ourselves a little scenario, and we just want you to talk through it in terms of what the challenge is for us.
Okay, so this is just an illustrative example, but I want to introduce you to Harmony. Harmony was tragically murdered on 20th of April 2021. Her perpetrator was known to policing, but known in a very different context. They were also known to multi-agencies. They were known in relation to county lines. We had data on Harmony, we were aware of her, but we weren't necessarily giving a holistic picture of the risk that potentially her perpetrator could pose to her. As a result of her death, we've had a serious case review, and this has had huge implications for the police force where she was resident in that area, but also nationally. This has led to significant media interest in the policing response, particularly in relation to black and minoritised women and girls, with huge community expressions via families, people with lived experience, VORG organisations saying, we don't trust the police, you are failing our girls. And this is the context in which we will now deliver our response.
Okay, so UK policing has a very, very recognisable structure when something like this happens. The death of a 16-year-old child would cause a huge impact inside most forces. Hopefully it's not often for most forces to deal with. So the death of a 16-year-old in the circumstance we've got a lot of contact with the police, there will be questions and there will be an absolute appetite at all levels, whether it's at strategic, operational, tactical, to know information. There will be gold commanders wanting to be briefed. There will be silvers being asked to put in place reassurance activity, that local teams will be delivering. And somebody like Harmony, there will be so much community involvement in terms of understanding the impact and the knock-on consequences for policing and for other agencies. So everybody will want information. and it will be absolutely insatiable for our analysts and people working in the intelligence field. So Katie, I'm going to promote myself today, and I'm going to become the Gold Commander. So there's loads of things, but I just pick out 2 or 3 things that are going through my head. I've got to manage organisational and reputational risk. I've got to understand, are there other harmonies in the system? What does that mean for our partners that we work with? All of these things, as a Gold Commander, I would be looking to you to answer. So give me some reassurance about the quality and the nature of what you'll be able to tell me about the risk going forward once this happens.
So your research and analytical capability will produce you a range of different products and insights as part of this response. But one of the things that we would absolutely start with would be a problem profile. Now, the problem profile absolutely will support the response to all of your questions. However, there are some key data dependencies in this area that relates to things like certain fields in data being filled in with the areas of interest that you have. You've got age, ethnicity, recorded sex. There's also flagging issues. Do we know about which cases, which crimes relate to domestic abuse? What do we know about county lines? So there's a lot of interdependent factors that are going to impact our data picture and give you a lot of caveats in your product. So yes, we will be able to give you a response, but with significant caveats because of our data quality.
Okay, so there's some gaps in our capability there, but I understand what you're saying. But what I want to ask Lynn then is, Lynn, I'm going to put you as a Silver Commander because I know that I'm going to be putting you under pressure to understand what are we going to do. I want a tactical plan, I want you to get out, I want you to be briefing the teams. What do you need to know at a Silver level?
Yeah, and obviously, you know, Katie, I'm going to rely heavily on you. I have a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot more risk. There's going to be a lot more media. We know it's going to come out, and we know that the impact that's going to have for policing. So if we go down to that tactical level, it really concerns me. How have we missed harmony? How are we going to mitigate the risk going forward? How are we going to predict what is going to happen going forward? So if we just take it down to that tactical level, I want my top 10 perpetrators, and for police officers, you all have seen the emails, top 10 perpetrators, top people at risk of CSE, etc. So if we look at our top 10 perpetrators, I want to know who's connected to county lines, drugs dealing, violent crime, domestic abuse. All those sorts of information, easy, right? Okay, just go onto your systems, pull it out, easy. Then I want you to go on to what skills we're going to engage with. So where are the high-risk skills? What information do we have? What capacity do we have to draw out those pieces of information? For example, referrals in relation to safeguarding. Again, those children at risk or suspicious activity within those particular areas. And last but not least, which girls are at most risk? Who's on our child protection registers? Who's linked in terms of our flags of child criminal exploitation, sexual exploitation, and so on? So what concerns me is, as we've discussed, what is actually missing? Because if we're missing some data, then some risks are going to be invisible. So my question is, who's missing from your top 10?
So the RNA capability in response to these type of tactical requirements would absolutely produce the kind of things that my colleagues in this room in policing will be really familiar with. You know, kind of Power BI, Click dashboards, showing you who are those top 10, driving your response. The exact same data interdependencies that we had for a Gold Command in terms of answering some of those questions will have a huge impact in this area as well. Now, obviously, all of these colleagues working in this profession are doing an absolutely fantastic job with the tools that they have, the time available to them. However, when we make these kinds of products, they absolutely will have intelligence gaps for a number of different reasons, and some of those will relate to data quality issues. And I just want to go into a little bit more detail just to give some illustrative examples of why we might not be able to see a harmony, for example. This isn't exclusive, it's a complex area, so there's lots of different things going on in this space. In any force, someone like a Harmony will probably appear in multiple different systems. In different places, we'll have a bit of information on someone, but there are a lot of different things that can make it quite challenging to get that holistic picture of what we understand about them. So in the first instance, this is the type of thing that we see, unfortunately, quite commonly, but this isn't unique to policing. This will absolutely be the case in other agencies as well. Unknown, not recorded, in very, very, very key fields. What that means for the professionals that I work with, the analysts, is that something becomes a made-up word alert unqueryable. So if they are looking to answer your question about who are my girls most at risk, Harmony was a young black female. If I'm searching in a query to say, I want to see under 18s, I want to see black females, if those fields are blank or not recorded, that has an impact on my results. Other issues are, and this is the really doomy one, the free text fields. This is real pain, and I can see some people smiling in the room, so I'm assuming that they have dealt with this kind of thing. We will have really interesting, insightful information about the picture of threat, risk and harm, but a lot of it will be contained in these free text fields. Again, there are different methods that can be used, but that's really challenging for having that complete picture of intelligence and understanding what the threat looks like. We also have a range of other issues. So what format can we extract this in? How then can that combine with our other data? And one of the massive problems that we have is that a lot of these systems are not linked together in an optimum way by which we can see the entirety of the intelligence picture. So I have to log into one and find out what I can there, and then I have to go here and do that, and then I have to go here and do that. It's not intuitive, and that creates massive, massive challenges. So where this leaves our brilliant analysts and research professionals, and obviously officers who are involved in this work too, is the free text world of doom, where a lot of our brilliant professionals have to spend an enormous amount of time manually reading records. This is just one illustrative example. There are absolutely cases which will have substantially more logs than this, but this is just one crime. And if somebody wanted to put together the picture of what happened here, which could be to someone like Harmony, they'd have to read 16 separate logs just for that one incident alone, let alone all of the rest of it. And I talk to brilliant analytical professionals very regularly all across the country, and they show me their fab Power BI dashboards and all kinds of things. And I'll ask the question like, that's amazing, how did you do that? I had to manually read 2,000 records. That's how they're having to do that. That is not sustainable. That is not an appropriate use of a skilled professional within policing, and it is not the very best way for us to deliver a strengthened response to violence against women and girls. We have to change. And there are people in the room here, people online, people all across our professional community who have great ideas about the solutions for this. One of those colleagues is my colleague Kelly Agadello on the VAUG Task Force, who's leading some excellent work with computer science applications. We can science the solutions to this. These things have a lot of opportunities within them, but we can't stay here because otherwise I can't see her and I can't hear her. So how am I going to deliver my very best response to her and her family?
So we've got some takeaways, we've got some asks. Lynn, I know you started with 2.
Yes, the first one that you can see is to adopt that intersectional lens for everyday decision making. And I mean, that intersectional thinking is like an analytical framework in terms of how we conceptualize, how we investigate our investigations and policing, and it gives us a bigger picture, because what we knew about Harmony, she was a 16-year-old black female, but what about trauma, what about culture, what about protected characteristics? And I'll give an example about protected characteristics. One of the biggest minority groups in the world is people with disability, whether that's visible disability or not a disability, and how you respond in an investigation, that could impact the path you go down. So yeah, I would think that in everyday thinking, everyday decision making, adopt intersectionality. Second one, invite academics to work with our performance and intelligence capability. As we know in policing, certainly over my career, the answer is always throw resources at it, and that's very necessary on many occasions. However, my ask is that we use academics, we use those subject experts to really redesign and re-engineer the processes we have.
Thanks, Lynn. Katie?
Yeah, my number one is be friends with data. Don't avoid it at a party. I know the word can be scary sometimes, and all these IT systems can be intimidating, and even things like DPIAs can just be a little bit daunting to kind of get into. Let's get into it. We want to deliver the very best response that we can to violence against women and girls, and data is a critical interdependency. So I would love for people to make better friends with our friend data. But also, I just wanted to talk about the critical need for us to develop our work in relation to the recording of protected characteristics. Again, if we can't see people, we can't hear them, and that is a very, very significant area where we have substantial challenges. There is an NPCC working group in relation to protected characteristics that is going to be producing guidance. There's also outstanding work going on in College of Policing in relation to a HR data standard. These things will help us. They are not obviously the only solution. This is a really complex issue, but it's a critical area of work that we have to get right. Our communities, particularly our black and minoritized communities, have substantial issues of trust with policing. We need to be able to see and hear to deliver our response and build that trust and confidence.
Thank you, Katie. And the final two from me is our workforce within policing, whether it's police officers, police staff, our volunteers, everybody. We need to listen, we need to build on what works to hear the workforce, where the change needs to happen, and we don't employ a variety of methodologies, and we need to do something different. And then the final one is the last absolute opportunity. A window has opened into policing. The opportunity to take research and focus it where we need to understand what's working and what do we do best, and then spread that good practice is here. So we do need, Larry, as much academic support and activity as we can get.